Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome you to the 23rd meeting in 2013 of the Infrastructure and Capital Investment Committee. Can I remind you all to switch off mobile phones and other devices as they do affect the broadcasting system, although having said that, witnesses will note that some members of the committee do consult their tablets during the meeting because we provide their papers in digital format. Gordon MacDonald has given his apologies for today, and Gil Patterson should be attending in his absence. Agenda item 1 today is Scottish Water's Annual Report 2012-13 and accounts. We will hear evidence from Scottish Water representatives on its annual report and accounts. Mary, did you want to say something at this point?
Yes, thank you, Convener. I wanted to make a declaration in relation to the consortium Thistle Water. My son works for one of the companies that is involved in the consortium, and he has no knowledge of Thistle Water, has had no involvement with the working of Thistle Water. However, I thought it prudent to bring it to the committee and witnesses' attention. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mary. We'll hear later from Scottish Water on their strategic review of charges and its related draft business plan, but at the moment we'll concentrate on the annual report and accounts. So I now welcome Douglas Millican, Chief Executive, Ronnie Mercer, Chairman, Peter Farrer, Chief Operating Officer, and Mark Powells, Chief Executive Officer of Business Stream at Scottish Water. Ronnie, did you want to say anything at the beginning?
Yes, I'll just make a few remarks, if that's okay. I'll get us warmed up and go, and obviously give you something to ask us, I guess, but as well, something more. Anyway, we're very pleased to be here. It's been another quite good year for us. We've kind of got to be one of the highest performing water companies in the UK, and we think that we are getting better at our value for money offering to our customers in terms of service and what they're charged. This is the 4th year of the regulatory period. It's a 5-year period. Quite a few good things. We outperformed our customer service target, which is good. It's known as the Overall Performance Assessment, the OPA, and everyone measures that. We've kind of got customer service at record levels, which is good. And we've got the highest ever level of drinking water quality we've had in Scotland. Managed a pretty big reduction in water leaking from pipes, and we've got a target to reach that's set by the regulator. So we've managed to reach that a year early. I must stress that you need to do a lot to stand still in that business, and you can go backwards if you don't do anything. But we've got to that point a year early. That's good. Continuing to support growth in Scotland, we've spent £487 million in infrastructure projects, water and wastewater, which delivers benefits for customers. Obviously, that's what it's all about. And it supports a lot of construction jobs at the same time. We're also pleased to say we're running at the highest level of new graduates and apprenticeship places in the business, both in-house and through our suppliers and delivery partners. We kind of encourage them to take people on when we've given them work, and that seems to be working very well. Currently, our average household bill is £54 per annum below the average bill in England and Wales. So we think that's pretty good value. It's kind of just under £1 a day. So quite happy about that. However, never complacent, as you can't be in this. We've had recent large bursts in 3 places, in Trunkmains, Maryhill Road and Bridge Street in Glasgow and Collington Road in Edinburgh. None of these are geographically related, but they happened, and they cause a good bit of disruption to customers. So they prove that there's still things that we need to try and preempt coming at us rather than I think we've handled them well when they've happened, but we'd rather they didn't. So when we're looking into the future, perhaps we can return to that. Moving on just to Business Stream, Mark's with me today. They've delivered a solid set of financial results, I have to say, in a kind of challenging year economically for business customers. You're all aware of that. The market's also seen quite a bit of increased competition. There are now 12 licensed providers operating in Scotland, and I think there's another one about to appear, as I understand it. I think they've risen to the challenge, delivering real benefits for 115,000 business customers. They're now paying less than they would have done without competition. even before we started losing market share, the threat of competition makes you better anyway. So that's happened. Since competition, over 30 million's been saved for business customers. They're paying 30 million less with keener prices. And water and wastewater efficiencies, we've kind of saved 35 million there as well. The public sector bodies, we've got their contract and they've paid 32 million less. They will pay 32 million less between 2011 and 2015 over the life of that contract, which will then be renewed again. Not necessarily with us, I mean, whoever wins it. And the customer service satisfaction levels have reached a high for business stream at 81%, and we've had quite a lot of reductions in complaints, 35% the last time we counted. So, Mark's keen to keep working with customers, innovating, and try to get them to use less water and therefore pay for less. That's the way we want it to happen. You offer a good kind of financial service, but a good customer service as well. They're now active in England, and we'll come to that later, helping customers with various solutions. The English market is due to open in 2017. We'll say more about that later. However, one note of caution. Business Stream is a competitive business. It's in competition with another 12. This is webcammed, and people who are trying to take business off us might be watching. So we will answer as best we can what you ask, but if it's something that I think is to a competitive advantage to a competitor, I'm not going to say it on camera, but I'm very happy to say it off camera if that's okay with you. Okay. Thank you, Convener. Can I hand back to you?
Thank you very much for that brief introduction. So, if I start, can Scottish Water continue to provide the cheapest water and wastewater services in the UK while sustaining the necessary levels of investment in the water and sewerage networks, do you think?
Well, I'll start that question by saying that it's our intention to remain one of the lowest bills in the country, in what you might call the lower quartile of bills. Whether it will be the actual lowest, somebody else might pass you from time to time, but we would expect to remain well below the average bill in England and Wales, and would expect to be amongst the lowest. Right now we are the lowest, but we wouldn't take not correct decisions to stay there for a pound, I think. But Douglas might want to just expand on that a little.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different dimensions to it, and I think it very much plays into the future discussion on the strategic review, because our plans for the future are very much informed by what customers have told us matter to them in terms of their expectations on service levels, service improvements, and what they want to pay. So our plans for the future are very much geared to trying to deliver what our customers want. And really, as Ronnie said, our expectation is that we will still be very significantly below the average and amongst the lowest, but very possibly we may not be the lowest, which really is not necessarily a surprise when you think about the geography that we cover in Scotland compared to the geography of some of the companies in England. And it's no coincidence that the company in England with the lowest bill has probably the greatest concentration of customers in around the English Midlands.
I mean, you mentioned that you had these, we've had these bursts recently as a result of dry weather. Well, thank goodness for the dry weather for a change. But you know, has that exposed pipework that you think that you need to up the investment levels so that you're replacing older older works more quickly, or do you think that the pattern of investment is such that you can keep the water? I mean, would you like to increase a bit so that you can up the investment?
No, I don't think we're looking for any more. It really is about clever investment. And if it was just about what's the oldest, it would maybe make it easier to know what to do. And you're absolutely right, Convener. These three bursts were all old pipes. But we've got an awful lot of old equipment all over the country. And I'm going to ask Peter to comment on this, because we do quite heavy kind of optioneering on where is it best to spend our money. And we hope that we are doing it in the kind of order that matters, not just by age, of our assets. But we do tests and see whether, quite often, something that is old will last a long time yet. So this was just a wee bit. We got 3 and we thought, that's a bit different. I know the weather's been dry and the ground, sometimes you can get a wee bit of shift in very dry ground that could crack. So, Peter, do you want to say anything on that?
Thanks, Ronnie. There's no real correlation between the age of some of our pipes and the number of bursts that we have. In these particular cases, although they were all very old pipes, when we took out the section of pipes to repair them, they were all in very good condition. So there's no correlation between the age and the performance. But what we need to do is to make sure that we've got sufficient resilience in our networks so that when we have something like this happening, which in this particular 3 cases was caused by dry weather, ground drying out and causing problems that way, we've got to make sure that we've got sufficient resilience in our networks so that we can backfeed our customers through different routes, so that it gives us enough time to repair these pipes when they happen.
Okay, has anyone else got any questions on pricing? Okay, if we move on to Scottish Water International, your report and accounts reports that Scottish Water International has won contracts in Qatar, India, New Zealand and Poland. Can you tell us how you see this part of the business developing?
Yes, I think I'll ask Douglas to say they've got plans for the future, and we've found it quite an interesting thing to do. It's making very good use of our people. It's giving people a view of the rest of the world. It gets our name known elsewhere, which is no bad thing. And I think it's safe to say that we're trying to get a core of people whom we can call on if we need them, because you don't want people doing nothing. So they're working at the moment, but if we get jobs elsewhere, we can maybe lift them into them, and people have let us know if they're prepared to go, because you have to leave home to do it. So, Douglas, would you like to expand on that a bit?
Yep, no, thank you. No, it's been last year was the first full year of international, and it was really quite a successful year. We had about 13 staff who worked on location across the year, principally in Qatar. But we also had a member of staff out on a fairly long-term basis in New Zealand as well, some shorter contracts elsewhere. Our whole model is very much to work in partnership with others. I mean, consultancy is inherently a competitive, low-margin business, so we need to keep a very close eye on not building up big overheads with this. So our approach from a marketing angle is to work in partnership with other major consultancies where there's an opportunity for them to leverage off our operational skills or our particular expertise in running a publicly owned water company. So it will be very much opportunity and market-led, depending on the opportunities for our partners. Probably in terms of markets, the Middle East is one of the most attractive for us. In this current year, we've done a small piece of work in Oman that we're hoping may lead to something more significant. But I think it is important to say that from a scale angle, this will always be a modest aspect of Scottish Water's activities. And we're really looking to find those opportunities where, frankly, we can leverage the most benefit from the perspective and the expertise that Scottish Water can bring.
I'm trying to find out how much income it generated in the first full year. I can't remember where I saw it, but you know, there are some people who say that you're not developing this angle of the business at a fast enough pace, and you know there are many more opportunities out there for Scottish Water than you're currently grasping. And I remember last year you said, you know, you were very much taking tentative steps and very well aware that it couldn't impact negatively on the core business. But are there opportunities out there that you could be grasping but are not?
In terms of appropriate opportunities for us to go for, I don't believe so. We have an active scanning of many opportunities in different countries. There are a number that take some significant time to come off. There are also many parties that are very keen to tap into our expertise without paying for it. The trick here is to make sure that if we're providing real value, that we get remunerated for that.
So how do you see it developing over the next few years then?
Okay, well, as Ronnie mentioned, one of the things that we've done over the past 6 months is to pull together a pool of what we refer to as designated consultants. Those are people who have a day job in Scottish Water, but who are willing and keen to work with us in an international capacity. So we've selected about 30 such people who have got skills in areas that we believe in which there may be a market demand. We are training them as consultants because the skills involved in being a consultant are more than just involved in being a technician or an engineer, so that when opportunities come along, they are ready and can be released to go and support them. In terms of your particular market areas, again, a little bit like Ronnie's reference to business stream, there are issues around degrees of commercial confidentiality that, again, we'd be very happy to mention informally, but maybe less so on the public broadcast system in terms of specific opportunities that we're targeting at the moment.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say, Convener, it's important to say what we're not doing. We're not into building, owning and operating something that we've paid for in the Middle East or whatever. That's not what we're doing, because that would be slightly gambling your public's money. What we're doing is supplying expertise where the project is funded by someone else. And we are putting that expertise into it because we've got it because we do it here. I mean, Qatar's a classic. They've got the World Cup in 2022 and they don't really have a sewerage system, as you and I would recognise. So we're helping to design all that and so on. But we are not building things and then hoping we can get paid and so on. That's not what we're doing. So just to kind of be clear in that, we're a consultancy, but we're not a build and operate, which we don't want to be.
So what's kind of the split between, you know, helping with the design of things like sewerage systems and the water governance issues like you're pursuing in India?
Well, so in terms of the work that we've done so far, in terms of value generation, then most of it is associated with supporting the Public Wastewater Authority in Qatar on their wastewater management system and the upgrading of the wastewater management system and the delivery of customer service around that. In New Zealand, our work was involved in leakage detection in Christchurch on the back of the earthquake that took place there. The work so far that we've done in the governance area has tended to be, in terms of value, lower, because it tends to be short pieces of work and very much senior level engagement rather than you people on the ground for months on end.
Okay, thanks. Mary, would you like to ask some questions on Scottish Water Horizons?
Yes, thank you, Convener. In your annual report, you indicate the Scottish Water Horizons are withdrawing from the green waste and composting business. Can you give me a bit more detail about the reason behind that decision?
Yeah, very much a function of market conditions. That, in terms of what we experienced last year, in terms of the sales value per tonne of waste that was available in that market, it was not economic for us to continue in that. So we are gradually withdrawing from that sector. Where we have contracts, we are honouring them. Now, clearly, we will have the facilities and the capability that if in the future market prices rise and it makes sense for us to get back into that, then that's an opportunity that exists in the future. But when you're operating in a competitive market like the waste sector, where there have been quite significant changes in market prices over time, you've absolutely got to respond to both those market opportunities and threats in order to maximise your financial position.
So, was a loss made? Is that one of the reasons that you're withdrawing?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Last year, the prices that we were able to achieve in that market weren't sufficient to cover the costs, and therefore it did not make sense for us to enter into further contracts in which we couldn't make an appropriate return.
Because certainly, I mean, from what I hear, the waste and the green waste and composting business is an increasing business. Is it because it's become more competitive?
I mean, absolutely, it's certainly increasing in terms of the tonnage that is available in the market. But what's increasing in the competitivity is it's a market where there's fairly low barriers to entry. It's fairly easy for new entrants to come in or existing entrants to expand. And that, frankly, at least over the short term, has driven market prices down to the point where it was not economic for us to continue at the current time. So
if you have made a loss, have you had to move funds from another part of the business to cover that loss? Or how will you manage the loss going forward?
It's all covered by the financing within the broader Horizons part of the business. So there is absolutely no crossover whatsoever into the core regulated part of Scottish Water.
It's maybe worth just saying a bit, but you're still in waste to energy.
No, absolutely. The Horizons business is very much focused on generating energy from hydro, from wind, and also from food waste. So we've got a food waste plant in Cumbernauld, and that in itself shows the vagaries in this market, because we've seen market prices fall and now we've seen them start to rise back up again. And I think that's just, we have to accept that is the nature of being involved in markets like these. There'll be opportunities and there'll be challenges just depending on what's happening in market pricing.
And the site that we're using for waste energy is the one that we had the green waste on as well, so we're still there in the same place.
And will you continue to operate in competitive markets that aren't part of your core business, or will you gradually withdraw and just focus on your core business?
I think this is very much about being opportunity-led. I mean, our whole growth strategy is predicated on looking at the resources that we have available to us, and where there's a real market opportunity, where we can really add real value to help customers, and can make money through that.
Thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Jim, did you want to supplement?
Thank you, Convener. Mr Millican, just to be clear, I think I understood you when you said that there was no crossover into the core business of Scottish Water. Can we understand that to mean that there is no knock-on effect for customers and for taxpayers?
Absolutely.
Okay. And in terms of the loss that was incurred, can you tell the committee how much that represents? Can you put a figure on it?
Well, the operating loss in the Horizons business last year was £1.6 million.
And my colleague, I think, was seeking to understand what the impact of that refocusing of the business will actually be. How do you absorb that type of cost?
Well, I mean, you've effectively across a range of our non-regulated activities, we have generated surplus over time. And it's the nature of any business that there will always be streams that are profitable, and there'll be streams of business activity that can struggle. And therefore you have to, across a portfolio over time, build up reserves that can enable you to absorb any shocks that come along.
Impact on the profitability and commercial viability of the non-core business?
No, we are expecting that Horizons will be a profitable activity this year.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on that bit? No? Okay. Mark, you've got some questions on business stream.
Yep, thank you, Convener. Mr Mercer, in your opening statement you mentioned the difficult economic conditions which had caused some difficulties around non-payment, particularly for business streams. Can I just ask how business stream are supporting customers who are having difficulty paying their bills?
Sure. The answer is in a whole lot of ways, and I'm going to ask Mark to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, we do recognise it's the last few years have been difficult. We have a responsibility to obviously get payment for the services that we provide, but where possible we try and be sensitive with customers by issuing payment plans for them, helping them if there's a reassessment that can be done to move them from unmeasured to measured. We'll support them in that. Signing customers up to direct debit where possible, so they've got more visibility and regularity of payments. But it is a difficult time for businesses, but also collecting the cash for the services we provide is essential for the viability of both our business and also to make sure that Scottish Water get the wholesale charges that they need as well. But yes, it is a difficult time.
Can I ask if there has been a particular effort or an exercise in identifying companies who are connected to the water network but haven't been identified by yourselves as having an account and are now being retrospectively charged for activities?
Yeah. As an industry, the regulator has put a series of sort of incentives and penalties in, and that means that we have a responsibility to, one, identify, and two, bill customers for services from the point of occupancy. So in the main, that's generated charges from both customers that weren't on a database or customers that haven't told us that they've moved into a property. And that's one of the most difficult things is, if a customer tells us from the point they move in, we can issue the welcome pack and we can start to bill them and make sure they get maximum value. Not all customers do that, so unfortunately we have to go and find customers that move into properties. So yes, we have, but also other licensed providers in the market are doing exactly the same thing. So we are identifying properties. We have an obligation to back bill from the point of occupancy. We're currently talking to the regulator, but also to Scottish Water as well, about reviewing that and reviewing the back billing policies. I can't give you anything more than the fact that we're in discussions. At the moment, I've put on freeze a lot of customers that would have been back billed until we've gone through this review, and I'd be happy to write to you afterwards and give you more details of that once we've got agreement on it.
Yeah. Just to clarify, so it's the regulator that makes that imposition that you have to back bill?
Well, I think, we have to bill from the point of occupancy. So when a customer moves into a property and starts to receive services and use water, in the main, I think it's fair that they should pay for that. The problem we have is that on quite a few occasions, customers don't tell us when they move into a property. So we have to go and find them and then find out the point at which they moved into that property and then bill them accordingly. What we're doing, we're reviewing that policy at the moment with the market, and as soon as we've got agreement on that, I'd be happy to write and to give you the details on it.
Yeah, but it'd be good to hear about that. I know of a couple of examples in my own constituency where a charity-owned community centre, a church who occupy a building in a town centre have been back billed, and it's closed the community centre, and the church are now struggling to pay their bills. So it'd be really good to hear about any discussions that you have on that.
Charities specifically is a difficult one. There's an exemption scheme, as you know, that's in place, that the rules are fairly rigid. So when we identify a charity that hasn't been paying for services, the first thing we encourage them proactively to do is to look at the exemption scheme to establish whether they would be eligible. And in some cases, we've been able to do that. I think we recognise that the charitable sector is under pressure, and back bills can be very difficult. And again, the exemption scheme is currently being looked at by the government, and there's a consultation document that will be coming out shortly for a new scheme that will start from 2015. We have put on hold any back billing for charitable customers at the moment until we go through this review and we can establish some new rules. And I would hope that would be sympathetic to charities.
My next question is on the plans to expand into the English deregulated market. If you can outline how you plan to take that forward, and if there will be any impact on Scottish customers.
Well, let me firstly be clear, our focus at the moment is very much on serving Scottish customers in our core market. And I think that's, as Ronnie said at the start, has delivered some fairly significant benefits to customers. Almost 70% of the market are now benefiting from lower prices. We've saved over 35 million in consumption savings. We've developed a suite of over 60 sort of innovative added value services that we're giving customers that are reducing carbon impact and improving sort of environmental things for customers. What we've done is built a suite of services that are now proving quite attractive to English customers. And as the market evolves towards England opening up their competitive market the same way as Scotland, by 2017, we need to start to try and capture some of that market. Because as an incumbent, when you start with 100% of the market, if you're not careful, the only way is down. So our ability to continue to do great things for Scottish companies is almost predicated on us being able to create a viable, growing business. So we've taken, if you don't mind me the phrase, some baby steps into England to start with. We've won a couple of customers down there, utilising a lot of our added value services, our ability to help customers to use less water, treat waste more efficiently, identify economies in their business. And we're starting to almost demonstrate our capability in that market. It certainly will not hinder the work we do in Scotland. In fact, in many ways, it'll help Scottish customers by giving us more expertise, more capability and more services that we can provide UK-wide and not just in Scotland.
Just for the purposes of information, can you tell us why the Scottish market was opened up before the English market, and why do English companies find it attractive to come into the Scottish market?
I started after the Act, which was in 2005, which opened up the market in Scotland, and maybe colleagues
effectively, there was an Act passed here to open the market up in Scotland, and then I came here in 2006, and one of my first instructions was to make it happen. So we have then separated business stream as per the regulatory compliance arrangement we have to follow, and we have opened the market up and gone for it. They didn't, and they don't intend to until about 2017. So they can come here, but we can't really go there. There's hardly any of it open, none of it's changed hands really. So it's just a timing thing. So we have to defend what we have and prepare for going there, and that's exactly what we're doing.
So I think why are people coming up here? Well, the success of the Scottish market has sort of started to make the Westminster government think that this is a good idea, and hence a water bill is currently going through Parliament to open up the English market. About 1.1 million customers, about £2 billion worth of income, and that will open from 2017. A lot of companies are now using the opportunity, knowing that it's coming into their market in England, to come to Scotland to learn about competition and learn how to be a retailer. But as the Chairman says, it's a bit of an uneven playing field between Scotland and England, in that the market in England doesn't open in the same way as Scotland until 2017. The market that is available today is not particularly attractive. Customers, you have to negotiate with the wholesaler to get a price. The margins are quite low. It's for water only and not for waste services, and it's incredibly cumbersome. So the opportunities to win business in Scotland are much more lucrative than in England, and that's why they're coming.
And are they lucrative because they don't have to do the wastewater, or are there other reasons?
No, it's lucrative in Scotland. It's not very lucrative in England. The market today in England is only open to 27,000 out of the 1.1 million customers. That's customers that use more than 5 megalitres of water on a single site. That opened up in early 2003 and has had very limited movement with customers switching. Whereas the market in Scotland is open up to all non-household customers, from a corner shop to a big industrial manufacturer and a public sector organisation, and it's for all services, and the model is very good, which is why England are currently taking a bill through Parliament to open up their market the same way.
2017, are the markets likely to be the same? As the regulatory regime likely to be the same, and are the profit margins, between Scotland and England likely to be the same?
I think there's a lot of the policy that's still emerging, it's fair to say. I think it's important to make the distinction that they are two separate markets run by two separate regulators with two separate governments. I think the challenge, and one of the things that we are trying to do, is to create a seamless customer experience. So especially for a multi-site customer that's got branches and outlets cross-border and between England and Scotland, we want them to be able to contract with one supplier, to get one bill, and to not see the join of two separate markets. But clearly the characteristics of the English market are slightly different. their price review process is through their regulator. That could have an impact on pricing and price structures. Where possible, we're trying to create a market where the customer experience is seamless, but they are two separate markets. In terms of margin and the likes, that has not been revealed yet, so I'd be guessing if I commented on that.
And it's just fair to say that Mark is actually helping this English market, and he gets to meet DEFRA, isn't it? And
yeah.
You know, because we've been at it for 5 years, and they haven't got there yet. So he's involved in that. So we're trying to kind of get our views across as best we can through Mark. He's got an important role to play there in saying, because 5 years later you know a lot more than you did, and they want to get every kind of bit of information they can to help their own market to open up seamlessly, I guess. So he's doing it. We're trying to influence it a bit so that it's as level as it can be.
In your opening remarks, or in his opening remarks, Mr. Mercer said that Business Stream are helping people to use less water and therefore pay less. Mm-hmm. But in my experience, that's not really true, is it? Because you can, you know, just have two people in an office using a kettle once or twice a day, and similarly the toilet and the sink and things, and you're paying a hell of a lot for your water. It's actually on the size of the premises, isn't it? And it's the number of RONs and downpipes and drains that you have, rather than how much you use. And I mean, you're not repairing the RONs or the drains, and you know, you're not even emptying the drains. That's the council. So I think a lot of people are very confused about how much they're paying for water when they're actually know they're using very little. Can you explain it maybe in terms of one syllable so that it's more?
Well, let me. I suppose the easiest way is for people to understand the rules of engagement in the market. There is a wholesale price that's created, which is the result of a negotiation between Scottish Water Wholesale and the regulator, and that creates the price that I have to buy the services for that customer at. There is also a default retail price, which is the maximum that I can charge the customer for the services that they provide. So within those wholesale tariffs, that's my starting point with a customer. And as I say, the maximum I can charge a customer is regulated as well. And that's created a fairly flat pricing for customers. And if we look what happened in other sectors, I think customers have benefited from quite a level price structure over the last 5 years. But as I said earlier, 70% of customers are now benefiting from lower prices than if competition hadn't been introduced. And how do I define that? That means that they've come off those default retail tariffs. So from a money point of view, from the rules of engagement, the wholesale prices that are created, our job has been to try and help customers to reduce from those default retail prices. But we've also done a lot of other things for customers. I mean, if you're a corner shop trying to serve your customers, the last thing you want to do is to be talking to your water provider when there's a problem. We've created electronic bills, electronic means of communicating with us that enables customers to do that at a time and a location that suits them. That's reducing the time that customers have to spend using water. We've introduced smart meters where possible across customers, which is giving them access to real-time information on their usage. And yeah, a lot of the costs are fixed for smaller customers, so their consumption is less. But for a large amount of customers in Scotland, that's helping them to identify when, why and how they're using water, and then we can help them to use less. So I'd like to think that the solutions that we've created will help all customers, but to different degrees.
And it's fair to Mark has an engineering solutions team who will go to sites, not to the corner shop, but they'll go to sites and look and see how they could use less and how they can help their effluent charges to go down. That all happens with engineers that he has. But that's for more commercial, industrial type of customers rather than the high street, say.
Okay. Alex.
Thank you very much, Convener. We heard in the opening remarks about how the target for the overall performance assessment score has been exceeded, comfortably exceeded when you see the numbers. And you spoke about being in the top quartile when compared with English companies. I wondered if you were able to say more, perhaps, about where you are in relation to English companies and which specific areas you'll need to make additional efforts in to match the very top performers.
Okay, I'm going to ask colleagues to talk about that. We have to remind ourselves the OPA, you can actually slide backwards on it as well. One massive failure at a big sewage treatment works and you're down the greasy pole fast. So, so you've got to keep working at it. But we have plans to stay there and catch up. I'll ask Peter, would you like to talk a bit about this?
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. Yeah, you're right. We achieved an OPA score this year of 368 against our delivery plan target of 338, so that's a 9% outperformance on that. And we made significant improvements in areas such as environmental pollution incidents. We hit our economic level of leakage a year early, which gave us additional points for that. We reduced the number of properties that are interrupted in their water supplies through burst pipes, improved pressure to about 900 other properties. So all of these measures helped us to outperform that target for this year. I think it's also worth noting in Ronnie's opening address, he said that our target for SR15, this regulatory period, was to move to upper quartile in terms of performance. And as we go through this year, we are on track to hit that upper quartile performance level. And that's particularly satisfying for us because when we started this journey, we were effectively the lowest performer in the UK and one of the highest costs. We're now turning that round to being one of the highest performers at the lowest cost. So things are progressing into this year in the same manner as they were last year. With regard to your question about England and Wales, our targets for this period, 2010 to 15, were based on benchmarking with the English and Welsh companies. They no longer measure OPA as part of their performance measures. They moved on to something different. So we've kind of lost that link now, but we're really focusing on the journey that we've been on and the fact that that upper quartile performance of being over 380 points effectively takes us into the leading pack. And our aspiration is to continue on that journey and continue to improve as we go into the end of this period and into SR15.
You mentioned some of the other targets that have been placed on you for this regulatory period, and there are, I believe, a total of 12 targets which have been placed on you by ministers to achieve by 2015. You've mentioned some of them. How are you progressing broadly against these 12 targets?
In general terms, we're progressing well across the range of targets. And our expectation is that we will deliver in full the expectations that ministers placed upon us. In some areas, we're outperforming. In other areas, some of the objectives that were set upon us required us to go and do significant study work to make sure that we understood the issues well before we start investment. So, for example, in Glasgow, one of the big objectives in this period is about making improvements to intermittent discharges to the Clyde or its tributaries, and also to help alleviate incidences of sewer flooding. Now, that is a very major programme of works, and to make sure that we're absolutely designing the most appropriate solutions, we've gone and studied that, and we have now launched what will be about a £250 million investment programme, some of which will be complete by 2015, and some of which will extend beyond. And that's absolutely consistent with, I think, one of the leading things that the ministers set for us in Scotland. I think is another example of where Scotland is leading the way in a UK context, which is to look at smoothing delivery of investment delivery across regulatory cycles to avoid any sort of boom and bust in activity going into the construction sector. So typically now for us, a regulated investment programme will involve some activity that starts early before the start of a period, clearly the bulk of it being delivered in the period, and then some projects being completed at the start of the next period. But in overall terms, we're absolutely on track with delivering Minister's expectations for this period.
Thank you. I was also going to ask a bit about complaints figures. And in the opening statement, Mr Mercer mentioned a figure for complaints being down by 35%. I've extracted a figure here that suggests that written complaints are down by 34%. Are we talking about the same figure there?
I was talking about business stream at that point.
Indeed. So it's just a similar figure. We mustn't get confused. So it would appear then that written complaints are down by 34%. Over the year. When we're talking about written complaints, are we talking about a difficult figure to compare there? Have complaints fallen across the board at that level, or are just fewer people writing to you?
People write less now and email more, but
yes.
I think Peter will manage to get around that by answering it in some way.
Yeah, I mean,
what does a written complaint mean?
This is all, you know, as a result of our focus in this regulatory period to really put customers at the heart of everything that we do, and we've put a significant focus on improving customers' experience of everything that happens in our business. So, yeah, in the regulated business, formal written complaints were down 34% in this year. And when you compare that to the number of properties connected, it's less than 0.1% of our connected properties written complaints. It's also satisfying for us that this journey is continuing for us. Back in 06-07, when we started measuring this properly, we had over 6,000 complaints. So we're seeing the level of complaints now that are about 65 to 70% less than when we started measuring that. So there is a big downturn in the number of complaints. Written complaints cover formally written letters that come in, emails that come in through electronic means. These are all measured as part of this, and it's a standard way of measuring, and it's a comparative measure that we've used comparing against English and Welsh companies as well.
So what you're telling me is that written complaints, as a description, includes that are coming in by electronic means, effectively. So there's no figure that's disguised in there simply because people don't write as often as they used to?
No. I think on top of that, it's worthwhile knowing, because there is a correlation with the number of telephone contacts that we get as well. So our telephone contacts are down by 24% this year. Now that is a real indication that we are doing things right in the business, because if we stop problems from happening, customers don't need to phone us. So we are currently, as I said, down 24%. But again, going back to 04-05, when we started measuring this in earnest, we had 850,000 calls a year into our contact centre, and that is now down to less than 350,000. So again, that's satisfying for us, because it's a real indication that we are doing things correct and stopping problems from impacting customers in the first place.
So you mentioned the number of complaints that you receive. Are you able to tell me how many of these were satisfactorily resolved?
Well, most of the complaints that we do, we put in place a new service review team a couple of years ago, and we've increased the skills within that team to make sure that we are dealing with customer complaints effectively. The measure that we have of that, and whether they are dealt with effectively or not, is whether they are then escalated to the Scottish Public Sector Ombudsman. And again, the trend in that is very encouraging for us. So this year, the number of complaints that were referred to us from the Ombudsman was down at 24, and that was down from 44 last year. And I can say that that trend is continuing into this year, and halfway through the year we have only had 7 complaints referred to us from the Public Sector Ombudsman. And again, if you look back on the history of that, from when the complaints, the second-tier complaints, used to be referred to Waterwatch, who was the predecessor to them moving into the SPSO, there was, at the early point, 365 referrals from Waterwatch. So that is now down to 7.5 years. So for me, that's a real indication that the new service review team that we've got managing complaints are dealing with that in an effective manner.
Yeah. My final question was the sort of standard final question, and it is, what is Scottish Water doing to further reduce complaints? But against the backdrop you've described there, it must become very difficult to further reduce complaints. What are you actually doing to try and achieve that difficult objective?
Well, what we are doing, I mean, there's two. Our strategy is for customers and customer experience and complaint is based on two main streams. The first stream is being more proactive and preventive in how we operate our assets, and that is so that we can operate and maintain the assets to prevent problems from impacting on customers in the first place. So if you don't have any impact on customers, you don't get a complaint. That's the first part of our strategy. And the second part is when things do go wrong and happen, and when you have the asset base that we have with thousands of treatment works, many thousand kilometres of pipes and sewers, things do go wrong. And the second part of that strategy is that we will respond in a way which leaves customers with a smile on their face, even although there has been a problem. And that is another big driver for reducing the complaints that come into us after that. One of the other things that we're really focusing on now, because you're right, as the number of complaints go down, it gives you less to focus on. Our big focus area now is on how we improve customer satisfaction of everything, on every experience that they have with Scottish Water. We measure that regularly, so every contact that involves a customer having a piece of work done, we survey that customer to see how satisfied they were with the experience from Scottish Water. And again, we've seen a significant increase in experience in that area over the years. From a few years ago at 63% satisfaction, we're now up to 90% satisfaction with the response that we're giving to customers when they require a piece of work. So even though we're at 90%, just to, as Ronnie said earlier, we don't rest on our laurels. I mean, it's a high level of performance, and when you compare that with the utility sector, public services, we are right up the top. But our focus in the future is based on targeting the levels of experience that customers get from other sectors. So online retail sectors, have generally got the highest level of customer satisfaction. We don't want to be the best of the worst, and that's where the utilities and public sector sit in terms of all the retail, all the different sectors. We want to target the best, and that's where we're setting out in our plan for the future, is to get our customer experience up to the levels that customers would expect from other sectors.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions on that? No? Okay. If we move on to climate change and sustainable development, Mary, you've got some questions on this.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Over the past 5 years, your operational carbon footprint has decreased by around 10%, and carbon emissions are falling. How do you intend to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the coming years?
I think it's worth just putting a little bit of context around this as to what are the drivers. It's really of energy, because energy is the principal driver of carbon in our business. In the water system, we have the lowest carbon intensity of any water company in the UK. And that is down in part to the work we've done in reducing leakage. It's also down in part to the good fortune that we have of those that preceded us and laid a lot of gravity-fed water supply systems. So we have less pumping to do than in England. On the wastewater side, conversely, we have one of not the highest, but one of the higher intensity wastewater services, and that's just a function of Scotland's geography. We've got 2,000 sewage treatment works because they're all serving local communities, and there's quite a lot of energy involved in pumping wastewater to wastewater treatment systems. So those are the drivers of energy use in our business. One of the factors that really over the past 10 years has been inherently causing an upward demand for energy and therefore carbon is the enhanced treatment providing partly on drinking water quality, but particularly on wastewater treatment. And I think it is worth just the committee understanding that in our drive to improve the quality of discharges to the aquatic environment, to meet EU standards as reflected in Scottish law, is that does mean that previously where there was no treatment or minimal treatment in the past, we now have much more sophisticated treatment that does consume carbon. So we've been fighting an upward trajectory, but nonetheless, we have, as you highlighted, made really good steps. We've made a 10% reduction in the past 5 years, and that has been quite largely down to the work we've done in reducing the level of leakage in the water system. We've also been, in many cases, changing the equipment that we use to, for example, pumps and motors to more energy-efficient equipment. And we're also all the time looking at how can we optimise the way in which we, say, treat our wastewater to give a double benefit of reducing energy and carbon, but that also then has a benefit on reducing costs and the impact on customers' bills. When we look ahead, the first bit of our challenge is to absolutely make sure that we're minimising the upward demand on energy need in terms of future, say, wastewater treatment. And then what we're looking to do beyond that is fully explore the potential for using the most energy efficient pumps and motors possible, to look at where we can vary the speed at which motors drive and therefore consume power. And we're also trying to make sure we take full advantage of the opportunity to generate renewable energy from activities. And the most efficient way of doing that is where we can generate energy and then use it on site and displacing energy bought from the grid. That has the biggest benefit really from a carbon angle. So there's a number of strands to our future intent.
And when you talk about wastewater and how you treat wastewater and the carbon that's used and the energy that's used, what's the impact on the customer? Is there any impact on the customer? Apart from better service?
The primary benefit of wastewater, the upgrades and wastewater treatment that we've made, is a huge benefit in terms of the quality of wastewater discharges to the local environment. Now, whether that is to a local burn or river, or whether it's being discharged, in the case of Edinburgh, out into the Firth of Forth. So that is a primary benefit. So clearly, that is a benefit into the whole marine environment, but it's also a benefit to customers as users of rivers and beaches.
And you say in your annual report that the carbon footprint is being reduced despite investment to meet statutory quality enhancements, and you have talked a bit about that. So is it a constant battle? Is the energy that you use to produce the enhancements high? So are you playing a kind of balancing game between low emissions and high and balancing them off?
I think there's three things, particularly when I look historically. Firstly, there's absolutely no doubt that upgrading the quality of our treatment, particularly wastewater treatment, inherently drives a big increase in energy demand. But when we're faced with a scheme to upgrade a particular community, we endeavour to find the most sustainable way of delivering the scheme in all the various dimensions, including how do we minimise the use of energy and therefore carbon on that particular scheme. So we try and mitigate the upward pressure on energy demand. But then on top of that, in terms of once that scheme is up and running, we'll look to can we optimise further the way in which energy is used in that site? Can we optimise how chemicals are used? Because clearly chemicals are a further driver of carbon. And then across all our existing asset base, we're continuing wrestling with how can we make, whether it's radical changes or fine-tuning, that will drive reductions in energy and therefore carbon consumption.
And you mentioned leakage, and I wanted to talk a bit more about the issue of leakage. Because again in the report it states that you've reached the economic level of leakage in your network. But that still means that over 1 billion litres of water leak from your network on a daily basis. And I struggle to understand how 1 billion litres can be economic. So could you explain to me how you're going to manage leakage going forward?
Let me just explain some of the context, and then I'll let Peter give you the specifics of how we're going to do this. The economic level of leakage is is a calculation that can be done at any one point in time. And the level of that economic calculation can change over time. So let me just explain, first of all, what it represents. What it represents is the optimal point where it would actually cost more to go and find and fix leaks than the value of water that is saved. Now, that could be, if you're in a zone where there is an abundance of water supply, then that is very much just trading off the cost of finding and fixing leaks versus the cost of water saved, the production of that water. If, however, you're in a zone where maybe you're more up to the limits of the capacity, let's say, of the treatment plant or the water supply, then the economics of driving leakage lower can be very different because you can potentially save a major capital upgrade. When you then look on a longer-term basis, the calculation changes because clearly the supply and demand in a particular zone can change over time, let's say because of new economic development or new housing growth. But it can also change because of changes in energy prices. And broadly, you'd expect that as energy prices rise, and most forecasters expect energy prices will rise over time, and because energy is the single biggest driver of the cost of treating water, then we will expect over time that the economic level of leakage will drop. But let me hand over to Peter, who will explain practically what we'll do to drive down leakage.
Yeah, okay. It's worthwhile putting some context around this as well. Member was right. We have reduced leakage by another 54 megalitres per day in 2012-13. The figure you mentioned of 1 billion litres, that's not actually correct. That's where we started the journey. The amount of water that is leaked is round the target is between 570 and 600 at the economic level, and we've outperformed that. And again, the context of that is that we've got to that position in 6 years, which is, in relative terms, good. It took the English and Welsh water companies 15 years to get to their economic level of leakage. And of course, we're learning from some of the things that they did in the early stages, so it helps us, but we're really pleased to have got there as quickly as we have. As Douglas mentioned, the economic level of leakage will change. We've already had a look into a refresh of that, and as the marginal cost of water through energy and chemical prices goes up, and the cost of us finding and fixing leaks goes down because we're getting more innovative, we're getting smarter, more productive at doing that, then the economic level reduces, and that's likely to come down a fair bit from the 600. So the things that we're doing, focusing on that to achieve that economic level, are pressure management. Pressure management is a really good way of reducing the pressure in the network, which stops leaks, but there's also added benefits from that, in that it stops burst pipes, which therefore stops interruptions to supply for customers, so there's significant customer benefits that come from that. We're looking at more innovative detection methods for finding leaks, so as time goes on, people in the industry are finding new ways of using equipment to find underground leaks, and that will continue to drive a reducing level of leaks as we go forward. I think that's the main things that we're doing. So it's working on using equipment, finding leaks more effectively, pressure management, and getting towards that reducing level of economic level of leakage.
When you say that the correct figure for the economic leakage is 600 what?
Megalitres per day.
Which is what? What's a megalitre?
Million litres of water per day.
I just wanted to be absolutely sure. That's what I presumed it was.
So we've reduced the amount of water since we started on the leakage journey by about 500 megalitres per day, which, just to put that in context, is the equivalent volume that is supplied to the whole of Glasgow and Greater Glasgow on a daily basis. So back in 2006, that water was leaking out of our pipes. We've now stopped that throughout leakage all over the country.
So I would imagine you have a rolling programme of upgrades and maintenance. It sounds as if the system is leaking like a sieve. Is it a case of you fix a leak and another leak appears, or is it not as simple as that?
Not quite as simple as that. Sometimes that will happen, but it depends on a number of things. I think pressure management is the key to that. So, yes, if a system is under stress and it's leaking and you fix a leak, what that can do is it can increase the pressure in that system, because you're obviously blocking something which was reducing the pressure naturally. So that's why we have to do the find and fix activities and the pressure management at the same time. So as we find more leaks, we can then turn down the pressure reducing valves to reduce the pressure in the network to get a calm network. But it's complex, and every zone that we have, and we have over 200 leakage zones, have got different anomalies with them. Different things that you would look at in every different zone.
I think, Mary, if you think not only leaks, but weeps and seeps. They're not things you can see necessarily, you know, they're weeping and seeping at joints and all the place. Rather, you'd imagine would be floating away when you say it quickly. Good question, though, and very difficult to explain, which is why they're explaining it, not me. But it's very difficult to explain, but it's what it is.
And I know it doesn't happen very often, but we are occasionally told in Scotland not to water our gardens and not to wash our cars, and to be very careful with the amount of water that we as customers are using. And if we think about the amount of water that we use and the amount of water that is leaking from your system, what impact does that have on the price that we pay?
In the short term, quite limited. And the principal reason for that is because we are at the economic level of leakage. If we drove leakage down significantly below the economic level, then that would actually start to increase costs, paradoxically, rather than reduce costs, because we'd be spending more on finding and fixing the leaks than the value of water saved. In terms of the customer side, the real benefit to customers in terms of pursuing water efficiency is the savings that they can make in their energy bills. And it is estimated that about 25% of the energy used in a home is to heat water. So as customers think more about using water wisely, then yes, there's a saving in the amount of water that we need to produce, but there is a direct personal saving to them in their energy bills.
I accept that, but I'm sure you must also accept that given the amount of leakage every day, it is a bit galling to customers to think that our bills are X and we're doing what we can and you're leaking all of that water on a daily basis from your system. You know.
Well, you know, we're trying to take a very customer-centric approach in this, and it's interesting. As part of the customer research activities we did for the 2015 to 21 period, one of the areas that we really explored in depth with customers was the whole issue of leakage. And we did this typically we get a group of customers in a room and being independently facilitated, and expose them to all the different dimensions around leakage, just in the way that we've done in these last few minutes. And what really came out of that was two different things. That generally customers, once they understand it, get the concept of the economic level of leakage and don't want us pursuing something that might add cost to the bill. But what did come out very strongly is that customers are intolerant to what they see as a visible leakage, or which you see, let's say, as a burst on water line in the streets, because you see that as a visible waste of precious resources. So the message our customers have given us is we need to get faster at fixing the visible leaks, but they understand the economic point in terms of the system as a whole.
So ignorance is bliss. If we don't know about it, it's all right.
No, absolutely not. We have got teams of people who are working all the time to find and fix leaks and make sure that we're operating the system as economically as we can in the interest of customers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Okay. Jim.
Thank you, Convener. I promise that my question will be much gentler than the previous round of questions. And it's simply this. The Water Resources Scotland Act has now been passed, and parts of which are being enacted. And I'm just interested to explore with you what steps you're taking through your various businesses and also working in cooperation with your different partners to implement the Act and also to achieve the Scottish Government's Hydro Nation agenda?
Okay, I mean, clearly the Hydro Nation agenda is much broader than the Scottish Water. We must play a key part in it, but it is important to remember that this is an agenda for the whole of Scotland. But in terms of Scottish Water, 3 or 4 dimensions. A couple of them we've really covered already, which is the work we're doing to try and maximise the development of renewable energy. And probably one aspect that we've not spoken about so far is what we're trying to do in partnership with major energy developers, that where we've got land holdings and it makes sense to generate wind off those land holdings, we're working in partnership to promote those schemes. We have some schemes that are already up and running, and we've got others that are in development, as well as all the work we're doing to maximise the scope for hydro generation or solar generation or generation from food waste within our own asset stock.
Can I just ask you specifically on that then? In terms of, you mentioned earlier, displacing energy from the grid. Is that at a very early stage, or are you able to begin to put some numbers around what that represents in terms of energy generation and perhaps income saved to the business?
Okay, there are a few different dimensions to this. There is energy that we generate on site and are able to displace bought-in energy. And then there's also renewable energy that we may generate on our asset base, but we don't need to consume it at that point, and therefore that gets exported to the grid. If you take those 2 elements combined, that is about 22 gigawatt hours of renewable energy that is currently being generated. Our expectation is over about the next 2 to 3 years that will broadly double, and then by the end of the 2015 to 21 period, depending on where we get to in discussing and agreeing our business plan, we're hoping to increase that overall self-generation capacity to about 75 gigawatt hours, which it will broadly be sort of 15 to 17% of the amount of energy that we need to consume ourselves.
That's very helpful clarification. And over what time period are you envisaging that shift?
Up to the 75 by 2021.
Okay, thank you. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's useful to clarify that point.
But in terms of, if you like, the total quantum of energy generated, the biggest significant, the biggest step change is really what can be done from wind. For example, we've got a scheme that. Where we've made the land available to wind generation that's already generating 350 gigawatt hours. And my hope, by the time that we're here in another year, there will be other schemes that will have got approvals. But I'm sure, as the committee will understand, it can be quite a long and complex process, and it's not guaranteed for success.
In terms of implementing the Act and the wider agenda, if you get anything further you want to
the other main area to highlight that we're looking at is what can we do further to support sustainable rural communities. We were talking earlier about the high energy intensity of some of our activities, and particularly if you take the wastewater side, that there can be a lot of costs and energy associated with supporting local communities. So we're doing quite a bit of research work in partnership with others to find what can we do to support sustainable rural communities. Are there ways of more local generation of energy and local supply of water and wastewater that is absolutely consistent with the kind of whole hydronation agenda? But I think one of the broader themes of hydronation is about how we work in partnership with others. And I think this is a direction of travel that we're increasingly on. If you go back to Scottish Water of a few years ago, it was very much about what would Scottish Water as a self-contained business do. Increasingly, and we'll probably discuss this in the next section, looking into plans for the future, it's about how we engage with third parties to deliver the most sustainable solutions for the people in Scotland.
Thank you very much.
Finally, as we have you here today, I think the public or the interested public would find it remiss of us if we didn't mention some publicity that you attracted on earlier on this week in terms of oil and water. We know they don't mix, but sorry about the pun. Can I ask you what your take is on the situation of the Kirriemuir sewerage work to the River Dean and the BP40's pipeline?
Absolutely. This is a scheme that is being developed to upgrade the quality of wastewater treatment in the and discharge in the Kirriemuir area. One of the dimensions of the scheme, and we've had this on many occasions previously, is that the path that the sewer needs to go on needs to cross major national infrastructure in terms of oil and gas pipelines. And what happens in that situation is we need to agree with the relevant energy companies the methods by which we will cross those pipelines and the way in which they will supervise the crossing of those, and then that gets all wrapped up in a pipeline crossing agreement. And I think we're basically there. All the method statements have been agreed. The work, when it happens, will be supervised by engineers from the energy companies, and the pipeline crossing agreement is effectively ready for signing.
So will there be any loss of assets or loss of money because of the delay in this?
Absolutely not. The work that's been done is all the preliminary work that is necessary for the scheme to progress. What we now need to do is just get the bit in place where it crosses the oil and gas pipelines.
So has it been lawyers fighting it out, really?
We've not had any lawyers fighting out. We've been purely dealing with the major energy companies, as you would expect us to make sure that we protect our interests while they look to protect their interests. And the crucial element around it is agreeing the technical details and technical method statements as to how these pipelines will be crossed in a way that clearly safeguards that important national infrastructure.
And it's true to say, Convener, that we've been doing this for years, and we've got, I couldn't give you the number, hundreds and hundreds of similar situations, but sometimes events change a wee bit of attitude. The BP Mexico thing has maybe made it a wee bit of a harder look now. That's real life, and so we have to take that into account, and that's been taken into account and we're proceeding.
So are you saying that the time taken is quite normal? Or?
No, I would say the time in this one's a wee bit longer because maybe it got a wee bit more difficult to get an agreement due to other events elsewhere, but now done and we're proceeding. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else got any further questions on this session? No? Okay, can we take a short pause then before we move on to the questioning on strategic review of charges? So I suspend this meeting for a short comfort break. If we can resume proceedings, the second item is to hear evidence from Scottish Water representatives again on its strategic review of charges 2015. This will include questions on Scottish Water's engagement in this process, including its related draft business plan 2015 to 21. We will also take the opportunity to ask Scottish Water about Scottish Water's procurement activity, given our current scrutiny of the Procurement Reform Scotland Bill. So can I welcome again Douglas Millican, Chief Executive, Ronnie Mercer, Chairman, Peter Farrer, Chief Operating Officer, and Mark Powell, Chief Executive Officer, Business Stream. Ronnie, did you want to make a short statement again?
For just a couple of minutes. Thank you very much, Convener. Really, Scottish Water were really keen to build on the successes of the kind of unique public sector model that we have here, take forward the interests of our customers in that. And that's different from the rest of the UK largely. But we think it's working quite well with trying to get in the business the kind of efficiencies as if you were a private company, if you like, the productivity that you want to get, the commercial edge that you need to have when you spend the money we spend, and the customer service that we think customers deserve. So at the same time, we then try to get the outcomes for our owner, which is the government, on all their directives, but recycle any gains we make in the business from beating the regulatory contract back into the business instead of sending them off somewhere else. So really keen to make that work, which we've got. So we've just had a consultation, our largest ever. Your views count, trying to get a look at what our strategic projections might be, looking at what water and wastewater services will look like over the next 25 years. So we've conducted pretty extensive research and we've been heavily influenced by customers, of course, regulators, stakeholders, and we've got a customer forum. Peter Peacock, as I've said before lately, of this parish is heading that. And I met Peter a couple of weeks ago at a seminar for a day, and he said, "What's keeping you busy, Ronnie?" And I said, "You are, Peter." Because we've had a big input, but that's what we wanted, and hopefully we're going to make that work for us. So we've just recently published this strategic projections for 25 years, what might happen, and then we've just produced a draft business plan for the 6 years you mentioned in your opening remarks, Convener, covering 2015 to 21. So we're very now focused on what we're going to do about that, and we're due to meet the regulator in the beginning of December to start the process, which will be quite long. A lot of discussion to eventually agree a final plan which should serve the best interests of the customers, the long-term requirements of the industry, and the prices that are affordable. So what are the key messages we get from this input from our customers and customer forum and others? Well, first of all, they tell us we can't compromise existing service levels. Nobody's going to accept anything going backwards. That's the first thing they tell us. They rightly expect we'll always have a safe and reliable supply of water, and their wastewater will be taken away and dealt with properly. So that's a given. They're looking for further improved services, but they don't want large price increases to go with it. So what can you do for fairly modest increases? So we've looked at that, and we think that we can commit ourselves to reducing charges in real terms, limiting further charges for this 6-year period you talked about to less than the rate of inflation. That's what we've started as the basis of the plan. So looking to the future, operationally we want to be proactive in preventative measures. We've just opened a new intelligent control centre which takes in messages from all over Scotland of telemetry, alerts, alarms, and tries to see out and stop things happening rather than just be, if you like, responsive, which you've got to be, of course, if something happens. In terms of capital, we expect it will remain spending around $500 million a year at the prices of 2012-13 to cover increased capital maintenance and to invest going forward in our services. That includes investment to address flooding from the sewers, which is going to have a bigger emphasis, and that's one of the things customers tell us heavily. Improve resilience in our water network, that's been asked already when you say, how do you, strangely a country it rains a lot, how come you sometimes have to emit warnings that say don't wash your car or whatever? And that happens. So how can we manage or move water resources, even in Scotland, more effectively to meet the customer needs? And then, based on our partnering experience in Glasgow via this long name, Metropolitan Glasgow Strategic Drainage Partnership, not an easy trip off the tongue, that, MGSDP, where 250 million is going to be spent. And that's for better outcomes at lower costs. And significantly, the best 10 million, I think, of that 250 was spent before we started in measuring, modelling, studying all the things that happen so that you don't waste money by starting and then saying, didn't know we had input there. So that's all been done. So hopefully that we can build on that. So that's Scottish Water. Business Stream, we're anticipating increased competitive pressure. I think that's a given. The Westminster Government's new legislation and reforms are going through. A significant opportunity for Business Stream as well. It's a £2 billion market to try and get a bit of. So we'd like to think we can do that. Mark's already said it's a bit unlevel in the moment. We've got an open market. They haven't. That will change, but we've got to try and hang in there until that happens. They've created a pretty strong brand. The strategy right now is defending up here and trying to position themselves to use their... You could almost have a kind of first mover advantage because you've been in it for years before everybody else, which I hope works for us, and then try and keep the customer experience up there. So that's kind of generally what they're trying to do. So I hope these comments give you some insight into the future of both Scottish Water and Business Stream and what they're going to try and tackle over the next 6 years as it happens in the plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim, you've got some questions you want
yes,
to start
thank you,
with.
Convener. Can I just say at the outset that certainly from my own experience representing an Edinburgh constituency, I can confirm what you've just said about Scottish Water being influenced by its customers. And Mr Farrer, who's with us, is certainly aware of the background, and I'd just like to put on record my appreciation for the constructive discussions that we've had, which I think will very soon deliver a very positive outcome for my constituents. Can I ask you then about the timeline for the strategic review? When, between now and April 2015, and when we can expect new charges to take effect?
New charges would start in April 2015, and we kind of give ourselves between the next year, if you like, at 2014. Hopefully, we won't need as long as that. Do you think, Douglas, it would be? I mean, it'll be a bit of time, but I'm not quite sure how long.
Okay. So we've issued our draft business plan at the end of October, and that's gone clearly to all stakeholders, but primarily to the Water Industry Commission, the quality regulators, and to the customer forum to consider. And what we're hoping is that we can agree a business plan with the customer forum by February 2014. If we manage to do that, or even if we don't, what will happen in April 2014 is the Water Industry Commission will issue their draft determination of charges, so their view of the future charges. It will then be open to public consultation through until June, and we're expecting over that time period too for Scottish ministers to confirm their investment objectives, their charging principles, and the level of available borrowing, such that the Water Industry Commission can then take that all into account, including the feedback on the consultation, the draft determination, to produce a final determination of charges that will be published in November 2014, and as Ronnie mentioned, with charges that will then apply from April 15 onwards.
Into the detail of the business plan itself, but if we could just stick with the process for a moment and ask, in terms of developing the business plan, has there been any input? I know you're saying that you're about to consult and to engage in quite an extensive period of consultation, but in terms of the actual draft, has the Water Industry Commission for Scotland and the Customer Forum been involved at this initial stage or not?
There has been huge involvement from many parties in this, and it may be worth me just taking a couple of minutes just to explain what has happened. The first step in all of this was that the Water Commission launched a review of how could regulation be enhanced in the Scottish water industry, And the themes that they particularly focused on was, did they need to review how the incentives operated on Scottish Water and the other parts of the industry to drive the best outcomes for customers? Secondly, how could much greater levels of innovation be brought into the plans that Scottish Water would come up with? And thirdly, how could customers be much more involved in creating the future for the water services? So that three-pronged approach has driven a major programme of work, the first stage of which was to produce a draft of these strategic projections, which was published October last year. Even in producing that draft, that was very much informed by working with the customer forum and with other stakeholders. And this draft went out to public consultation, as well as the Your Views Count exercise to customers that Ronnie mentioned, where we got a lot of feedback in the period to February this year. We then worked very extensively with all those parties, but particularly the customer forum, then in shaping up the draft of our business plan that we published. And as an example of that, when over the spring and early summer this year, we produced a whole series of service improvement reports, which would set out, let's say for an area like drinking water quality, what is the nature of the current service provision? What is the nature of the future challenges? What are the options that are available for meeting those future challenges? What degree of choice do customers have over those? And that has then informed very much our drinking water quality improvement plan, which is partly about meeting statutory requirements, but it's also partly about meeting customers' expectations for the reliability and trust that they have in the drinking water service. So this plan absolutely reflects a huge amount of feedback we've had from stakeholders, as well as a very extensive customer engagement programme that we've carried out.
How have you involved Scottish Water customers specifically in developing the plan? And
right.
How do you intend to continue to involve them as the plan is rolled out? And I'm thinking specifically of the investment plan with a rolling, which will be updated on a rolling 3-year basis.
Okay, in terms of involving customers, there have been many dimensions, and if I draw the committee's attention really to the draft plan on page 5 to 7, particularly page 5, it sets out a summary of all the different dimensions that we've used, and they've ranged from doing having groups of customers sitting in a room for a 2-hour facilitated conversation, right the way through to having surveys done of customers where they can engage online. We've built on the extensive feedback that we get from customers just as part of their normal engagement with us on services. The customer forum have done their own validation of that research. So a multiplicity of different channels. And I think what was encouraging, both in terms of how our research came together and the way in which that was validated by the customer forum, there was a huge degree of commonality of view. But what was really helpful for us with the way the forum looked at it was that they maybe held the lens up slightly differently. So, for example, we might have said, well, our research shows that customers are willing for prices to rise by little. And the forum would say, well, OK, we've got the same basic research conclusions, but our actual take is slightly different. We don't think it's so much that customers are willing for prices to rise. It's more an acceptance, maybe a slightly reluctant acceptance, but an acceptance that probably to get the improvements we want, prices will need to nudge up a bit. And it's actually into some of the nuances of customer feedback that we've been to really understand what is it that matters to customers. So that's for now. In terms of for the future, for the IR18, the investment review update in 2018, we believe we've got a pretty good understanding at the moment of what some of those key areas of investment focus will be. But we will be absolutely engaging with customer groups, the forum if it's continued on, the consumer representative bodies, as well as customers directly, to understand if we need to adapt those plans depending on what happens over the next 3 or 4 years.
That's very helpful. Just finally, can you then share with the committee what you see as the key challenges facing Scottish Water across the range of issues that you're engaged with as set out in the business plan?
I think at the very highest level, It is to meet customers' service expectations for the lowest possible cost. And that is the crux of it, because, as Ronnie mentioned in his opening remarks, customers absolutely take for granted the reliability of the service, and we need to invest to maintain that basic service provision. There are a number of areas where they would like us to make improvements to deal with issues such as sewer flooding, drinking water quality, improving the resilience of the system so that they will never have to suffer an extended period of supply interruption, but to do that in a way in which price changes can be held below the rate of inflation.
In terms of the increased competitive pressure that you spoke about earlier, what do you see as being the key threat or challenge facing Scottish Water?
Well, Scottish Water business stream is 12 more competitors now, and they've nowhere else to go at the moment except here, because there isn't really, the market's not open in England. That little bit that is open has got no margin, so that's why nothing's changing hands. So if you were them or I were them, I'd be up here learning so that when it opens there, I can defend my own patch and try and maybe attack someone else's. So we're getting them kind of slightly, I mean, okay, use the pun, flooding in, but I mean they're coming in because they're looking to get some business up here, but also to get used to the whole idea. Would you like to add anything to that? You're having to defend it all. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's what competitive markets are all about. Is if you're not very good, then the customer will go elsewhere. So it's as Douglas said, in the core business, it's about service and price and innovation. I'd add in there. You know, a lot of customers will make a price decision. Others will make a decision based on service, but others will make a decision by how proactive and how innovative you can be in solving their problems. And what we've tried to do over the last 5 years is try to recognise customers and their individual needs. You know, the needs of a multi-site retailer are very different from the needs of a council, say. And so starting to tailor services to them. And there's nothing like the fear of losing a customer to get you to raise your game. And so I spend most of my time looking over my shoulder. Is somebody going to do something we haven't thought of? That drives us to try and do more. The benefit for Scottish customers is we stay focused on doing great things for them. And the benefit then is we can take those propositions into new markets as they emerge. But yeah, that fear of losing a customer is a great motivation to wake up and be on your game in the morning.
Okay, Adam.
Thanks, Convener. Morning, gentlemen. Sorry I missed your initial presentation, but I've been very interested in hearing what you have to say. And if I could maybe look at some of the financials in the next 2 or 3 questions. Given the investment needs set out in the draft business plan, do you think that the plans to limit household bill increases to less than inflation, as you said, and if you could just specify what that actually is, then I'd be very grateful.
Okay, well, let me just start with the second part of the question. Historically, utilities right across the United Kingdom have referenced inflation by reference to the retail price index. One of the dimensions that came out from our customer engagement, particularly with the customer forum, was the recognition that actually for customers, it's no longer RPI that's recognised. Things like benefits and state pension are now all linked to CPI. So really, as a first in the utility sector, our commitment on prices is about below inflation increases as relative to CPI. If we was to look at that in the traditional utility way relative to RPI, our draft plan would be equivalent to about 6% below RPI across the 6-year period. But relative to CPI, it's just a little below CPI. Now, in terms of the affordability of the whole plan, what we've tried to do is to work this on an iterative basis. So we've tried to understand what matters to customers in service and price. We've also looked at what's the likely borrowing that will be available from the Scottish Government. And what we've tried to come up with is what we believe is an optimum package to optimise that point of expectation for service improvement, together with customers. What they say that they are prepared to pay, and to find that kind of that optimum point. But it is a draft plan, and we will be discussing now this draft plan with the customer forum, and that may come out with ultimately with a slightly different answer.
Now, my understanding is the draft business plan requires £720 million of new borrowing from the Scottish Government, which you mentioned the importance of that borrowing. How does that compare with the previous period and or the current control period, and what discussions have you had with the Scottish Government on this subject?
In the current period, which was a 5-year period, compared to this new period, which will be a 6-year period, we started off originally with an expectation that we would require £700 million of borrowing. Due to a combination, really, of 3 factors, that has now reduced to, I think it's 485 million. And the 3 factors driving that has been there has been some beneficial factors in the broader economic environment, for example, reduced construction prices. Clearly, there's been issues of our performance improvement beyond the targets set in the regulatory determination. And then when we look at the practical phasing of delivering our big improvement programme in Glasgow, because that's going to tail into 2017, then some of the resources that for that will now be required in the 15-21 period. But that's broadly just around an average of about £100 million per annum. So when we look at the next period, that is going to rise slightly to 120 million, and we certainly had discussions at official level with the Scottish Government that is a reasonable planning assumption to use. And I think that was the way that it's reflected in the draft budget that was published back in September.
I seem to recall that in a previous budget, the Scottish Government had taken back something from you that you didn't need. Could you explain what happened there?
There have been a number of occasions over this period where the borrowing allocation is reduced, and that's what's taken us over time from the 700 million that we started off to the 485 that I think it is now, and it is just a function of those 3 factors that I mentioned in answer to the last question.
Fine. In terms of the review of charges, obviously they'll have implications for the charges levied by Business Stream as well. Can you explain how Business Stream has engaged in the review of charges and how it's planning to deal with the eventual outcome?
Yes, take that. We, in a number of ways, we do a lot of, on an ongoing basis, research with our customers to understand their views and attitudes. We also, the contacts we get from customers, we analyse them to look for any issues that we can feed into the process of areas that customers are either having problems or would like investment. And also, one of my board sits on the customer forum, so he's feeding into the plan and challenging and consulting with Scottish Water on the needs of business customers as well. Like you, because of separation, I'm quite interested to see what the outcome is and the impact it'll have on business customers as well. But we've been actively engaged throughout.
And really, I mean, what we've been seeking to do is absolutely to understand the views of all licensed providers. But from our perspective as a wholesaler, we've got 12 very important customers in these intermediates of licensed providers, and Business Stream is one, but the other 11 are very important to us too, as well as understanding the views of the ultimate end customers or end users of the products that we supply. And if I just explain about the customer forum composition, the forum is made up of members who effectively are there to act on behalf of the interests of household customers, but 2 members to act on behalf of licensed providers. So there's one that Mark mentioned from Business Stream, but there's also a representative of another major licensed provider on the customer forum to make sure that the voice of business as well as the voice of household is heard.
One final question on how you intend to take the long-term strategy forward, and how do you intend to monitor and review the implementation of your long-term plans?
Fundamentally, we as a business are very often making investment decisions for the very long term. And I think the steps that we've taken this time to publish this 25-year strategic projection is a major step forward to make sure that as far as one ever can, you have the best possible understanding of the longer-term context and what some of the opportunities and challenges might be over that time horizon, so that when you're making nearer-term investment decisions, typically in pipes and assets that might last for 20, 50, 100 years, as far as possible, they're rooted in the best possible understanding of that longer-term context. So that's why we did the 25-year plan. And it will therefore be really important that we keep our forward scanning up to date, so that when, for example, we're coming to the investment review in 2018, but particularly when we're coming up to the price review in 2021, that we then take a fresh update to the strategic projections and that we roll those forward for 20, 30, 40 years beyond 2020. And I think, there are just so many uncertainties and opportunities over that time horizon. The only certainty is that a lot of our assumptions will be wrong, but I think that thought process gives us the best possible chance to have a really good understanding of the future and improve the chance of making the best possible investment decisions for the long term.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ronnie.
No, I was going to just add one thing. That England and Wales go to the same process at the same time. And some of them in the past have had maybe inflation plus plans. And not only do you get a good constructive feed from the people we talk to about what we've put in, like the regulator and Peter Peacock's team, they don't just give you a view as to what they want, they also give you quite a firm view as to what they don't want to see. And we've had that. And I think recently you might have seen that one of the biggest companies in England tried to get a price increase in to build a big tunnel, and they were told no, you can't have that. And I think they're going to go into a kind of inflation minus setup as well this next time, which would be different for some of them from before. And that's also public mood. Let's be clear, utility bills are a big part of what you spend. So we don't see their detailed plans, but we keep an eye on what they're doing too, and that's kind of where they are. So I'm quite comfortable as I kind of step back from all the work being done here as to that we're kind of in the right place with this, I think, and there's several months of no doubt debate and negotiation to take place, but we shouldn't be out of kilter with what they might be, let's say, forced into, but encouraged to be doing down there as well.
Thanks very much.
I think that's been very helpful, and we as a committee plan to hear the views of the Customer Forum, the WICs and other stakeholders in the spring, once they've made their views known on your business plan. So we'll find a kind of optimum time to, but certainly before the ministers move to make their final decisions to consider all this. Thank you. Just finally on, you'll know that we have a Procurement Reform Scotland Bill before us, and Scottish Water, in common with other utilities, is subject to a different procurement regime. There is your own Utilities European Directive and corresponding Scottish regulations. Can you maybe just explain why you think utilities come under a separate regime?
Okay, we certainly have been, I think, in recent times, first of all, given a high award in our own procurement, won a UK award for excellence. And we've been trying to be helpful to what the thinking formation here. But we have what we have, and maybe I'll ask a colleague just to kind of maybe get into a bit more detail on that.
I mean, in terms of the why do utilities have different regulations? That's clearly born in measures to make sure that the activities of utilities are regulated right across Europe in terms of the way in which they procure. For as long as Scottish Water has been in existence, we have needed to comply with all those obligations as set out in the legislation, Convener, that you mentioned. But beyond that, we've been endeavouring to adapt our whole approach to procurement to make sure that it best meets the needs of delivering for our customers across Scotland, that it supports cost-effective and efficient delivery of our services, but also in a way that supports the local contractor base in various parts of Scotland.
But specifically, why do you think, how has it emerged or over time that utilities are under a different regime from other procurement, do you think?
Well, I think it's about it's the additional obligations that are placed on utilities. I'm not personally familiar with the history of this in an EU context, but I would imagine that it's all to do with making sure that because utilities are there to serve the customers and the broader public, that in the way that utilities undertake their activities, that it's done with very much a public interest perspective in mind.
Okay. We've obviously had representation that Scottish Water should be covered by the procurement bill. And I think one of the reasons is because it's publicly owned. What would your take on that be?
I mean, clearly that would be an option. But from what I understand in the thinking that the Scottish Government went through in preparing the bill, they recognise that because we are already covered by a statutory framework of procurement obligation, that there is an inherent danger, often at quite a detailed level, that if there were two distinct pieces of legislation applying to us, there is a risk of conflict between the operation of those two pieces of legislation.
Okay. You will know that the procurement bill places a number of duties on contracting authorities, including complies with duty of sustainable procurement, imposing community benefit requirements on certain contracts, and producing annual procurement strategies and reports. Are you already doing some of these things? And is there any reason why you shouldn't do more of them?
I mean, without looking at a specific checklist of every dimension, in very broad terms, we are. And we are continue looking to evolve our procurement. As Ronnie mentioned in his earlier remarks on this, we have been recognised as having a world-class approach to procurement. We've been awarded the gold standard, gold accreditation by the Chartered Institute of Purchase and Supply. And I understand that we're the first organisation in Scotland to achieve that standard. But like everything else to do with Scottish Water, we will never rest on our laurels. We will continue to look at how we evolve our approach. So if I give you a couple of examples, we've done a lot of work to make sure that our whole approach to procurement supports the youth employment agenda. We have now got over 100 apprentices being employed within our supply chain. We've got areas where we look at how we support local contractor base, and we're quite specifically increasing the use of local framework contractors in the more rural areas in Scotland, because that's the right thing to do to support sustainable local communities. It also is the right thing to do for us to support efficient service delivery.
I think
before you come in, Ronnie, that last point is quite interesting, because we've heard, I don't know whether anecdotal or not, contractors in the Central Belt getting contracts that cover Dumfries and Galloway in the Highlands, and people running up and down white vans because they've forgotten the right bit. So that bit about local contractors is very interesting, and I just wondered if you could confirm that that's the case, because I think maybe a recent round of contract awarding has meant that things have maybe become a bit more centralised.
Well, I think if you look at what's happened over the years, then absolutely I can look back in the past where things became centralised and we awarded a lot of national contracts, and that has delivered a lot of efficiencies. But what we've also found through that, as it has created the sort of situation that you highlighted, where you could get a vehicle going from the central belt to do a fairly small job, and actually there's more time spent travelling than actually fixing the issue. Absolutely. And therefore, consistent with our whole theme about learning and evolving, we have put in place, and we're going to continue to put in place, more of these rule frameworks. So if I give you some specifics, we now have framework agreements in place in the islands as well as in the north and Argyll, and we're now looking to roll that approach out into the borders and the northeast. So it's a continually evolving position, but we absolutely recognise the point that you just made, Convener.
Okay, and you know, we congratulate you on the awards that you've won on procurement. So what lessons do you think that you've learned from your procurement activity that might be valuable to the rest of the Scottish public sector and that we could recommend in this bill?
I was going to say, Convener, I'll let the experts get the detail, but part of Scottish Water's success is because it's driven against there's another big 10 water and sewerage companies in the UK, 9 in England and 1 in Wales. And we have used those as comparators to drive at getting costs down, service up, and it's all measured by the OPA, as was talked about earlier, the overall performance thing, and also what the bill is. And procurement's not that different. We drive for cost per metre of what we do in laying pipes and building infrastructure against what we think others in the industry are doing. It's a good comparator for us. So I kind of, if you asked me to make a choice, I would choose to stay in the utility comparator bit, because I don't think we're comparing a procurement with the rest of the public sector. We're comparing with Thames Water, Wessex Water, Northumbria, right down through. So I prefer that, because I kind of know what that's about, and I say, well, how come they're doing it for less than us, or whatever. So I think we stay there. But there's no reason why most of the common points you've said we should be doing. There is no doubt about that. And I think Joe was actually asked to go and speak to the government about, because we won that award, could you tell us what you do? So we tend to share very heavily what we think we're doing well. Is that right?
And we have had done over the years. For example, the approach that we've taken towards energy purchasing. Energy is one of our biggest costs. We spend over £40 million a year in purchasing electricity. The approach that we've taken for a number of years now has been shared with the Scottish Government, and I understand that is now used quite broadly across the government in Scotland. But a lot of the principles on procurement is no different to anything else in business. It's about listening to and engaging with the supply chain. It's working out how we can best align the activities between what we need and what suppliers need to drive value out. It's about giving predictability of demand to your suppliers, so that they know exactly what they're planning for, so they can resource to the right levels to deliver efficiently. So it's about planning and prediction as much as anything.
Okay. Does anybody want to add anything? Anyone got any final questions? Well, that's been a fair session, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. It's been most useful for us in a variety of areas. So thank you, and I suspend shortly to allow the witnesses to leave the room. Thank you. Okay, if we can quickly move on. Our final item today is to consider a series of negative instruments pertaining to parking matters in East Dunbartonshire, as set out in the agenda. Members should note that no motions to annul have been received in relation to these instruments. Does anyone have any comments on these? No? So is the committee agreed that it does not wish to make any recommendation in relation to these instruments? Agreed. That is agreed. That ends our business for today. Our next meeting will be the 27th of November, where we will take evidence from 2 panels on the Procurement Reform Scotland Bill. And I close the meeting. Thank you.